Well, good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk about a filler frame for the Bailey Standard 9 extruder and how I made one. The first thing I did, though, was I got myself a cup of coffee in my Frank Hot mug. Actually, it's my wife's Frank Hot mug. It's her favorite, and I took it and put my own coffee in it. So that's how you start this. You get yourself a coffee cup, maybe a Frank Hot mug, and get ready to go. So I'm going to explain a little bit about how I made this sort of after the fact today, because I already have it done. But I'm going to take you through the steps, and I hope you find it informative. Here we go. All right, we're outside. We're in my work area in the back of my studio. And what you're looking at is a very old, very cheap table saw that I got from Sears many years ago. Cheap and old as it is, it served me well over the years. It's been to 3 studios with me, and we've done a lot of work together. And it's the first essential tool, for me anyway, in making this filler frame that we're talking about. And I'm not going to go into great detail, but the gist of it is that I'm working with 2x4 or 2x6, I guess, in the case. This is the scrap that I grabbed. But you take a piece of ordinary pine, and I ripped it, as they say, I cut it lengthwise. You can see the gap in the blade. I ripped it to a width. I could use a 2x4, but I happen to use 2x6s. I'll show that real quick. I ripped down a length of a 2x4. I correct myself. I used 2x6s because I could get 2 lengths out of each one, but you could do this work with a 2x4. At any rate, the gap that you see there is the exact distance from the bottom of the expansion box, and I'll show you that inside, to the upper inner surface of the expansion box, and that's the dimension that we need for the thickness of the filler. So I made several lengths of this, and next I'm going to walk you, hopefully not too irritatingly, over to this part of my outdoor area. Here's my boat trailer and such, but over to, not that yet, over to this chop saw. So that's tool number 2, if you will. And the idea is that the chop saw is what enabled me to cut the lengths of wood into mitered cut lengths that I assembled into the frame itself. So that's tool number 2, a ordinary chop saw that I used at 45-degree angles to make my cuts. Now I'm going to stop this and we're going to head inside. I'll be back here later to talk about a little bit more of the fabrication, but for the time being, into the studio I go. Okay, so we're back in the studio. I'm back in the studio with you and showing you now what I actually made with those saws out there. I ended up with 4 pieces that are going to be the filler frame, and each has a miter cut. Each of these is the exact length, so they'll fit up into the Bailey's expansion barrel. They go together like this, of course. I'll try to do this one-handed, it's awkward. But they'll assemble into a square. And then what you see here, I'll back up just a bit so you can see the magnets that I installed. Now the next tool, for the sake of that, I'll just sort of slowly pan so you don't find it too annoying. Oh, there's Frank's mug. I used a little drill press that I keep, and I used it with an auger bit that's the diameter of those magnets. So I had to do some trials here with a piece of scrap so I could get the depth of the drill to go exactly the thickness of the magnets, so that magnet, when glued in, was flush with the side of the frame board. So that's what I used. So this is tool number 3 of others that I had to use, but this was essential to getting that opening cut, 2 for each of the boards. So let's pan back over here quickly. We're back to this. And so what I've done is I've made it so that I can take one of these pieces and walk it over to the extruder itself and show you just simply how it clips in. So here's the bottom of the extruder and its expansion barrel. And I'm gonna try to hold this still, and I'll put it into place as best I can. It's a little bit strange, but you heard it clip into place. And of course, that's how the other four go into place too, so that you have a completed frame. Now then, so some of you are wondering, well, what's the point of this? Well, the idea is that installed, these frame pieces displace a lot of the area that would be filled with clay. So when you're using smaller dies in the Bailey, you don't have to fill the expansion box completely with as much clay. And by that, you don't have as much to clean out when you're finished. So that's what we're trying to do here, is make it so you don't have to go through so much grief to use this, what is a really cool extruder. So I'll put the rest of the pieces, and then we have a little bit more to talk about tools, and we'll be done. Okay, for this segment, I've assembled the filler frame pieces onto a Bailey die. It's one of the smaller of the hollow circle dies. Now mind you, if you were using Bailey's biggest circle die or any of the other big ones, you wouldn't use a filler frame because you need all the space in the expansion box so that you could extrude the large opening, through the large opening. But when you're using these small ones, you don't need all that clay out there to get the job done. And that's great and everything, but one of the problems for me was and one of the features of the Bailey extruder, the standard die I like, is that since these dies don't index like they do on a North Star, where they don't stay in one place, you can move this plate around, and by getting the opening so it's partly under the extruder barrel and partly in the expansion box, that will typically generate a curved extrusion, a noodle that you might like. With this in place, it seemed that when you were using this extruder die, you couldn't get the extrusions to curl. You didn't have the freedom of movement because this interfered with that. So part of my idea here was to make it so that when I put this die into place, I would only use 3 segments, and it would allow me to move this die forward and back in such a way that I could get it into the right position to make curved dies. So that's really what this is about. By making it into segments, it gave me the freedom to choose that I could reposition this thing. And what I've also done, by the way, let me move this out a little ways. You can see red lines that I've made here on the die itself. That gives me a registration place to know, help me govern where to put it so I get the kind of curve that I wanted out of the extrusions that come out of this. So that's pretty much why I did what I did. And the magnets are also good for holding the things in place while I'm getting the die itself into place. So therein is the reason why I did all this stuff. And by all this, you get some indication of what the tools are that are involved. I also used a, oh gosh, what's over here? I didn't happen to use that little saw, but way in the back there, I used a bench sander to tune up some of the fit. I can walk a little bit closer to that. That came into play. So you can see that there's some tools involved. It's hard to think of me doing this all with just hand tools, power tools really, and sanders especially, and dust control. You can see the vacuum hoses and things. Really helped me get this stuff done without making too much of a mess, because this studio of mine is used for a lot of things besides just woodworking. So I want to be careful about that and manage it all really well for the sake of simple projects like this. Well, here we are, greetings. We're sort of at a demo stage, and this is the first of 2 that I did using the filler frame pieces installed in the Bailey with one of the smaller sized hollow extrusions that's still on the big Baltic birch plates. So I may have shown you that. You may have seen it in one of the other still images, or when I was setting up in an earlier video. But the confounding thing, folks, is that when I was setting this up and guessing how it was going to come out, it actually started coming out. I can move in. I think you can see it easily, but you can see that it started coming out to the what would be my left as I'm standing in front of the extruder. And I didn't expect that, but it's partly, I think, because this thing is sensitive, and if the die isn't centered, or excuse me, the opening isn't centered under the barrel properly, you're going to get a curve. Well, that's part of my intent, but I was hoping that by bringing the die a little bit forward, I could make the extrusion come out forward, and it came out to the side. So a little bit confounding, a little bit of embarrassment, but the other thing I wanted to point out is the pieces that I use for the filler frame, they're great. But as I had it extremely moved, the die that is, extremely moved to the front, and I was just using the quick grip clamps, the die plate pushed down and was pushing clay out, and it just plainly wasn't working the way I had it set up. So what I did, as you can see, was for the second attempt here, I put the Bailey C-clamps in place to give me good support at the front. So doing it the way I was, without the fourth of the four segments in place, to really make an extreme curl in the extrusion, that was working, but it put so much strain on the front as the extrusion was being made that in the second attempt, I went back to using what amounts to 3 of the clamps. You could have a third quick clamp here and eliminate the need probably for the Bailey C-clamp. And then over here, of course, 3 on the right side to balance it out. So there you see it, and there's not much else to show. I may do a little before I set up to use the other smaller die adapter. I may show you how this was set up, but you get the idea. And so I'll get set up with the other little demo, and that'll be it. So stay tuned. Okay, I think this might be my last segment. We'll just see. Those of you familiar with the Bailey know that they also sell a set of, well, a whole set of dies on aluminum plates like this one that you see. And this happens to be the, what is it? A octagon? Really neat shape. And these are designed to be installed in the extruder with clamps where this plate rests at the bottom of the barrel, inside the expansion barrel. And I always found this really tedious to get these C-clamps in place and get this clamped in, and just was a turnoff for using this great extruder. So what I tried to do was come up with a better way, an easier way to use these, any of the Bailey dies. Come up with a better way to get them up into the extruder, as I said. And this is what I came up with. So let me walk over to the extruder and show you what I've installed. First and foremostly, my recommendation for this is to use these clamps instead of Bailey's clamps. These are at Harbor Freight or Home Depot or online, whatever, but these are infinitely easier for most of us to install compared to these that I've used for years. I mean, these are beefy. This is what you get with a Bailey, but my goodness, these are a pain in the neck. So if you do all this stuff, use them if you want, but understand that these quick grips are much better. Anyway, let me kind of get down here and see if I can show you this. Can you see that wooden block? It's in place with 2 of those clamps. It's designed to have 4 of them, but that block is the thing that enables, there's one of my paintings in the background I see. That block, that filler, is what enables me to use those small hollow dies much easier. So let's go over to the table. Ooh, that's too fast. Okay, so I'm back over here. And what I built is a frame that's designed, there it is. It hasn't been glued and stapled yet, so I'm gonna do this carefully. But it's designed so that the die rests in here just like that. And that's what you get ready to install up into the expansion box. So the extruder die hardware, the cross member, goes up into the barrel, and then you hold on to the whole assembly and then clamp it into place with one of those quick grip clamps, put the other one in, and now you can do your extruding without worrying about the C-clamps and the expansion box and all that other business. What I had to do, though, for the sake of making this, I'll show you again by taking this out, was I employed yet another tool, that being the router and the router table that we passed by outside next to the chop saw. I had to route this out so that the die plate would fit flushly. Took a little bit of trial to make sure that this wasn't proud, that this didn't stick up above it, and a little bit of sanding. So the next part of this is to finish this thing off with where the other die frame is free to move. This one is going to be glued and nailed in place so it's sturdy and it can be set aside. And that's pretty much it. That's what I built for this thing. So these are the sorts of things that you can modify the Bailey with, so it's just a little bit easier to love, you know, so it's easier to work with. It's a great machine, but needs a little bit of improvement that makes life easier for it. So I hope you find that helpful. I hope I explained it clearly enough. Oh, one thing I might mention is when you're, a thing to point out, I wonder if I should do this. I bet you I covered it in the other videos. Let me pan real quick down and then up. See this thing? That's something that when you're using all that hollow die hardware up into your barrel, you want that thing in place as you're coming down, because that stopper is what's going to keep your plunger plate from going too far and damaging anything. So depending on what kind of extruding work you're doing, you want to remember how to put that thing into place, and you know, so you don't damage your equipment or yourself or anything else. But there you have it. I may, if I get a chance, in another segment or some stills, I'll show you some of the extruding work I do with this, with the new design. But I think for the most part you understand it, and after you see this, I welcome your comments or questions, and I'll be more than happy, as always, to do my best to answer them. And if I can't find answers, I'll find a place where the answers are. Take care, everyone, and thanks for your attention. Appreciate it. Thanks, Frank. Great cup.